Triple H, Kane, two WWE Hall of Fame talents. Between them, they have landed every major prize the professional wrestling industry has to offer, and were involved in some of the most revered feuds of all time during wrestling's hottest period. Now, during the heights of the Attitude Era, the two would cross paths, with Kane aligning with China to face Triple H and the corporation. Kane would even join D-Generation X, sort of, and would tussle with the game on several occasions as the Monday Night Wars rumbled on. But we're not here to talk about those feuds between the two. Even if you didn't read the title when you clicked this video, just the mention of Kane and Triple H in the same breath will make you think of one feud and one feud only. Katie Vick. I'm Fraser Porter, and this is Worst Storylines Ever. And in this instance, the title barely does the storyline justice. Katie Vick. Katie Vick. Katie Vick. Let's start at the beginning then, and see what led us to this infamous, colossal train wreck of an angle. The year is 2002, the year of Lilo and Stitch, Oasis's heathen chemistry, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. The more things change, the more they stay the same, don't they? 2002 was also the year that WWE found themselves staring into the future, and things weren't very clear. The Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars were firmly in the rearview mirror, as was the World Wrestling Federation itself, with the company rebranding as WWE that May. The brand extension was in full swing. Stone Cold Steve Austin had one foot out the door after walking out of the company, The Rock was transitioning ever more into Hollywood, and The Undertaker was in the midst of his big evil persona, which, while it did have its highlights, it's not the most memorable stint of the Phenom's run. Shawn Michaels was back though, as was Hulk Hogan and the NWO, while a young mound of beef and hatred known as Brock Lesnar was positioned as the future of the company. Out of all this coming and going, toing and froing, there was one consistent face at the top of the card: Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. After his historic Madison Square Garden return in January, Triple H was de facto the biggest star in the main event scene. He won the Royal Rumble, won the undisputed title at WrestleMania 18 over a hapless Chris Jericho, said see ya to on-screen wife Steph, and then turned heel against Shawn Michaels in the summer. Importantly, Trips was just given Big Goldie by Eric Bischoff after being drafted to Raw in September and then started an association with Ric Flair. The Reign of Terror had begun. In terms of big name babyfaces to take on Tripper on Raw, there was Rob Van Dam, who Hunter had soundly defeated at Unforgiven in September, and there was Kane. That's it. Now in 2001, Kane was arguably at his peak. While it had been 4 years since his debut and 3 since his, at the time, sole WWF Championship win, the Big Red Machine had managed to stay fresh by adding more human elements to his character, while physically he had never and would never look better. Come spring 2002 and he'd be taken off the road due to a bicep tear, but would receive a monster push upon his return in September. He'd quickly form a tag team with The Hurricane and would win the tag team titles, then would face Chris Jericho for the Intercontinental Championship and a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship. And guess what? He won those too. What a show off. So, Trips had the big gold belt, Kane had the IC and Tag Gold, and was the #1 contender. At No Mercy, they were set to face off to unify the World Heavyweight Championship and the Intercontinental Championship. All the grapple eggs were in the proverbial wrestle basket. Surely you'd just book this as a look at these two dominant big bastards, I wonder who'll win match. But no. While the Attitude Era may have left town, its crass stink remained, and WWE just had to give this feud some unnecessary spice. While Triple H was presented as the cerebral assassin and a vicious heel, he still had that classic cowardly streak running through him, like 99% of WWE heels, to be honest. He was clearly terrified of Kane, and on the October 7th, 2002 episode of Raw, sought to start dismantling Kane's world. First up, Hunter and Flair battered the Hurricane backstage, meaning he was not fit to compete on the night when he and Kane were due to defend the tag titles in a TLC match against Bubba Ray and Spike Dudley, Chris Jericho and Christian, and Jeff Hardy and Rob Van Dam. Oh god, they're not leaving those belts. But wouldn't you know it, Kane emerged victorious in what is a criminally forgotten match. Not quite the heights of the first 3 TLC matches, but definitely worth mentioning in the conversation. For what it's worth, Triple H defeated D'Lo Brown in a blindfold match the same night. So pretty great night for matches then. As Kane celebrated in the ring with both tag belts, Triple H and Ric Flair made their way to the stage, noting how Kane was the happiest he'd ever been. Triple H asked, "How happy is Katie Vick? 10 years ago you killed her. That's right, Kane, you're a murderer." I know we just saw a demonic 7-foot-tall Burns victim win a match that involved tables, ladders, chairs, and Spike Dudley, but it's still a sport. It is still a sport, isn't it? We're meant to view wrestling as a sporting contest. But this is sports entertainment, isn't it? And everything that happens on a WWE broadcast exists in some weird little bubble world. A world of local medical facilities and watching TV at a 98-degree angle, where the entertainment in Vince McMahon's mind is more important than the sports. Storyline bending is one thing. A blurring of the line between pantomime and reality is all fine. But straight away accusing someone of murder in a sporting context is just stupid. Imagine a press conference before a Champions League match and Kylian Mbappe accuses Lamine Yamal of killing someone. The police would swarm the stage and the match would be suspended pending an investigation. However, this was during a period of WWE creative where Vince McMahon was obsessed with making everything more like a soap opera. How about, and this is a bold and frightening idea, just letting wrestlers wrestle matches for championships? I know, lock me up and throw away the key. So straight off the bat, we've jumped the shark, and it only gets worse. Earlier, I mentioned how Kane was at his peak in popularity in the early 2000s. Now, what we knew about him was, he was supernatural, right? He was nigh unstoppable, yeah? Undertaker had burned him to a crisp. And during his initial run in 1997 and 1998, he was pant-browningly terrifying. As the character evolved, Kane kept most of these traits intact. He ditched the cool voice box thing, and his outfits got skimpier, revealing that they weren't quite as many burns as we'd initially been led to believe. Still, despite being a babyface, Kane was still a remorseless, unfeeling bus stop of a being that could and would trounce people just because he could. But first, he and Hurricane dropped the tag title to Chris Jericho and Christian. Then he poured his heart out on TV, and most of Kane's fantastic, albeit ridiculous backstory was destroyed in seconds. Rather than go, "Triple H, mate, you're talking absolute pish," Kane took the mic on the October 14th edition of Raw and told the story of Katie Vick. Kane noted how Katie came to his early matches in 1996 when he was training to be a wrestler. So that's goodbye to the narrative of Kane spending years of hiding in the shadows fuming at The Undertaker. Kane then admitted that one night when driving a drunk Katie home from a party, they were in a car accident, which killed her because he could only drive automatic, and Katie favoured a stick. And that's goodbye to his aura, because can you imagine Kane driving a car? Preposterous. Look, I can excuse murder, but I draw the line at Kane driving manual. An emotional Kane apologised for the whole affair, and Triple H came out mocking him, saying that Kane was lying and was also drunk when he drove her home. Again, Kane should have just denied all of it and battered Hunter like he'd battered literally all of WWE's roster over the preceding 5 years. Now, I'm not sure what the statute of limitations were in this case, but still, police should have swarmed the arena like in Trap, and Kane should not have been seen again while they investigated this account. The man just admitted to killing someone on live TV. But it's wrestling, and for better or worse, the Attitude Era changed the rules entirely. What didn't make sense was why Kane was bothered about causing this supposed accidental death. This is a man we'd seen set multiple people on fire, remember? Speaking of which, why wasn't he arrested for that? Big boss man, you've got some explaining to do. But like Taz, I digress. Triple H not only alleged that Kane was squiffy when he drove Katie home, but he also alleged, and I quote, that police found Kane's semen in Vick's body when they did the autopsy, and that Kane was madly in love with Katie Vick, but she just saw Kane as a friend. Hunter asking whether Kane forced himself upon Katie or waited until she was dead. Again, I thought this was pro wrestling. You know, sleeper holds, suplexes, the occasional powerbomb. Call me crazy. Triple H also noted how Kane wasn't charged with murder or manslaughter. That's that put to bed then. Kane's conscience was surely clear, if not a little uneasy, and he didn't need to admit to anything. Especially when he could have instead, set Hunter on fire and thrown Ric Flair through a window, as he usually wants to do. Interestingly, he did not shut Triple H down here either. Later that night, Kane would attempt to get his hands on Triple H, but the champ would absolutely leg it, so Kane chokeslammed everyone in sight instead. Here he is. Kane has finally arrived. So that was your 2-week build to No Mercy, and at the event, Triple H defeated Kane due to a plethora of ref bumps, sledgehammer shots, and Ric Flair run-ins, and with that, the Intercontinental Championship was shelved. Yeah, it's actually often forgotten during all of this that WWE just decided to bin off the Intercontinental Championship, meaning Triple H was the only male singles champion on Raw. Nothing good came out of this storyline. So in the grand space of 2 weeks, Kane has gone from a double champion to an accused, murderous, necrophile chump with 0 championships, 0 hoes. Easy come, easy go. Match done, and surely that's the end of this feud. Surely. 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 One night later on Raw, Triple H was in his full-on egotistical, unstoppable dickhead mode, so no different then, and as part of his championship celebration, just wanted to rub Kane's big red face in a pile of big red turds. Heading to the production van, Hunter gave them a videotape and instructed them to air it. And ladies and gentlemen, theys and others, we had officially the lowest point in scripted professional wrestling history. It doesn't get lower than this. A warning notice flashed on screen saying, "Warning, the following scene contains material that may offend some viewers. Discretion is advised." We were then transported to a funeral home in October 1992, with Kane, aka Triple H in a Kane mask, sheepishly entering the room, paying his respects to Katie in an open casket, before perving on Katie, aka a mannequin in a cheerleader outfit, blaming the doll for her own death, and then ultimately undressing Katie and sniffing her knickers, before taking off his top and pants, hopping into the casket, and going to Pound Town. Then time for the punchline. Kane reaches behind Katie and grabs a handful of mints before proclaiming he really screwed her brains out. Can't imagine Alan Shearer doing this on Match of the Day, can you? Where to start, honestly? Offensive, crass, insensitive, poorly judged, nonsensical, and just grubby and off-putting. Now this is professional wrestling at a time when it was crass and grubby, yet this was something more like a bad parody of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. You can always ask in any situation, how far is too far? And in the case of Katie Vick, WWE worked out the answer with regards to professional wrestling storytelling. According to Bruce Pritchard, this entire angle was down to himself, Michael Hayes, Brian Gewirtz, and Vince McMahon, a collective toilet flush that should never have left the writer's room. Bruce EP would allege that he and Hunter originally wanted to film the sketch more campily, more ridiculous, and far less graphic, which I guess would have been better than what we got. But no, Vince McMahon wanted to play it more straight and wanted it shot seriously. Even worse, it was filmed in an actual funeral home with a real-life funeral happening one room over. That's genuine. That actually happened. Bruce Pritchard and Triple H both argued with McMahon, telling him that there was no way they could air the video. They even showed it to Kevin Dunn, who agreed and also told Vince to not air the skit. McMahon, feeling backed into a corner and not wanting to lose face, doubled down and demanded it be shown on TV. Great decision, Vince, as ever, you horrible, weird man. This begs the question, just what did this skit achieve aside from pissing off literally everybody? The feud was as good as done. Triple H had already won. This was a pointless addendum to a 2-week storyline that had already gone way overboard before No Mercy. But don't worry, Hunter wasn't done there. While Kane and RVD did manage to get a win over Ric Flair and Triple H that same night, the game obviously needed to get his heat back, brother. 1 week after the airing of the funeral home footage, the cerebral bellend made his way to the ring with said mannequin just to tit about some more. Before he could put on his own live sex celebration, Kane's mate Hurricane Helms came out to put an end to the charade and aired his own video, a video showing Triple H having stuff surgically removed from his anus. Haha, you sure showed him. Honestly, I bet Vince McMahon found this hilarious, and remember, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Again, this was Kane we were dealing with here. Why didn't he come out and cut Hunter's head off? Later that night, the two would blow off their feud with a casket match on a random episode of Raw. Kane got the win thanks to returning Shawn Michaels, and the lid was firmly closed on the whole saga as WWE instead shifted focus to the impending first ever Elimination Chamber at Survivor Series just a few weeks later. Post Survivor Series, and Triple H would feud with Shawn Michaels, while Kane would tangle with Batista as Big Dave began hanging out with Hunter and Flair. The whole Katie Vick saga has gone down as the worst storyline in wrestling history, with fans, critics, and professional wrestlers past and present all voicing their hatred for the saga. When looked at it as a whole, the main word that comes to mind is unnecessary. Kane vs Triple H in 2002 didn't need this kind of storytelling. I mean, no feud in wrestling needed this kind of storytelling, did it? Regardless, you were combining the big gold belt and the IC title in a match featuring two of the biggest stars on Raw. That's a storyline right there. They didn't need anything else. And then, the match in question didn't even main event No Mercy. Brock vs Taker in the Cell did. Aside from the disgustingly crass nature of the entire sordid saga, this completely ruined Kane as a character. His aura would never return, and his popularity would never recover. He would famously unmask a year later in June 2003 after losing his mask to Triple H. And yes, while bald, unmasked lunatic Kane would have a good run initially, it just wasn't the same. Without the mask, he was just another big dude, and with his initial backstory being erased by the Katie Vick saga, he was now just another big dude who was also a necrophile. According to Bruce Pritchard, the initial reason for this storyline was to introduce Katie's brother, Scott Vick, who had a blink and you'll miss it run in WCW as Sick Boy as part of Raven's flock. Still managed to get into WCW vs NWO Revenge on the N64 though. What a legend. However, after seeing Vick in some dark matches, the WWE got cold feet and dropped him. But the storyline was already in motion. I mean, genuinely, why couldn't they just cast a different wrestler as Katie's brother? And even if they did, what was the long-term plan? There was no way Kane could be so emasculated by Triple H on TV and pay-per-view and then go into a feud with a brand new character and not come out on top. It was always doomed to fail. Luckily, WWE would learn from their mistakes and would never run any stupid storylines ever again. No, of course they didn't learn, and we'll go through another famous misfire next time. Just remember though, if you do have a couple drinks at a party, then make sure your designated driver is as sober as the judge. And isn't a 7-foot walking porta potty in a mask. It's a very key lesson that everyone should take on board.